I'm just gonna kick it off, and Ben will join us later. Um, I have a fleece at home that I washed with a sticker on it. It is no longer a fleece, so just heads up. Very important details. Shout out B-sides. Definitely go if you can. CyberCon, absolutely support it 100%. And with that being said, let's talk about some chaotic data. Quick disclaimer: you guys have seen this before. Have to say it. Whatever I say, whatever Ben says, are our own personal opinions. It does not represent our companies, clients, friends, anything else, barely ourselves. So this is me. This might be me. This is not me. Tough start, tough start. Just very quick, you need to know. I'm a CISO for a software company out of Carlsbad. We make software for banks and credit unions. This is where the camera is. Have some acronyms. If anybody knows what PPL, means, shout it out. No? All right, cool. I guess we'll never know. Private pilot single engine land. Okay, I founded a couple of companies. My main experience is kind of telecom, fintech. Had a stint with the Danish Minister for Foreign Affairs. That's where I'm from, if you couldn't tell. Where I help kind of companies establish and do strategy and all that kind of good stuff. So let's see if this thing works now. It does, sweet. So data, there's a lot of it. You guys probably had an idea. 175 zettabytes last year. I don't know how many DVDs you have, but this is quite a lot of data. And it is doubling roughly every 4 years. So we'll have 400 of those bytes by 2028. So that's quite a lot of data. Zooming into maybe companies a little bit more. The average company has like 5 petabytes of data, plus minus. Obviously, that's across different types of companies and all that stuff. But it's a decent volume. And just as an indicator to how crazy it is right now, right? Western Digital announced they're sold out for 2026 and partially the following years as well. So they have like filled their contracts. You cannot buy any hard drives from them. You all seen the memory pricing go crazy, all that stuff. So just an indicator of that this is probably going to pick up speed, not slow down. So 5 petabytes. That's about 75% of organizations. Any guesses what they use that 5 PB for? Anybody? ISOs? No. It is a lot of stuff, right? Like you have AI workloads. You have modern applications generating more data. You have rich media like video, sound. That's going to take more data. We're keeping all the data longer because regulatory rules, right? And cloud is not helping in this regard, at least, right? Because you have it's very, very easy to get a snapshot or spin up a new environment or create another worker to do something, and all this creates data. So there's all this stuff out there, and I'm sure we're doing a great job protecting it, right? For sure. We surveyed 1,000 organizations. Well, not we, somebody did. So we're going to play a fun little game. There you go, Data Feud. Thanks, ChatGPT. So, all right. Hang on one second. Gotta make this larger. So, all right. Any guesses? How many organizations have exposed sensitive cloud data as a percentage? All right. Survey says. Click on the other bar. 90%. What about having unverified apps? Unsanctioned AI? This thing does not want to be. We'll do it the old school way. 98%. Yeah. What about like accounts and users that have access that they just haven't pruned? It is a little better, but not a lot. And how many have exposed data to AI, like data they shouldn't have? 99. Oh. So yeah, and this obviously is some scary numbers, and we can keep going. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. I don't know which one of these you find more scary. I don't know. I was kind of going between a few of them, but they're all scary. So clearly this is a problem, right? And this is something we need to figure out. And the traditional way to address this has been DLP. Does everybody kind of know what DLP is in this context? Very quick, just data loss prevention, right? So kind of been around for many, many, many years. It kind of assumes that we know what we're dealing with, right? We have data stored in places we know where it is. We know kind of how it's formatted. We can write rules. We can write regexes. We can do all this stuff to kind of protect this data. And we can block it as it kind of travels through our firewall or a cloud environment or something like that, right? Obviously, that is not very conducive to what we have now. So some of the things we want to look at is understanding the risk, right? Quantify it, understand what we have. Where do we have it? Is it kind of grouped in certain places? How do we address all this? We want to figure out who has access to it. What can it do with it? Is it being used for this AI training? 99%. That was quite high. Workflows, policies, all this stuff, right? The keyword being resilience, right? We want to get to a place where we can react quick because we cannot block everything in advance. Like, that's just not feasible. Some vendors might say they can. I don't know. You can ask them about it, but in reality, that's probably not very feasible. So this company called Gartner, not sure if you heard of them, came up with something called DSPM, Data Security Posture Management. Do you want to see the first slide I had for this? It was this guy. So, yeah. I figured, that's probably in their marketing material somewhere. But yeah, so that is essentially having a platform that has access to everything, close to everything, right? It has access to your cloud services. It has access to everything you can give access to. There's databases, unstructured data, all that stuff, right? So these are the 7 kind of core components of it. And we'll just go through them very, very quick. And then we'll bring in our good friend Ben shortly. So discovery, right? Find out what we have. Where is it? Pretty obvious, right? Then we have to classify it, figure out what is it, who has access to it, all those things. Then data flows, like how does the data get there? How are these things linked together? And what kind of risk does it pose? Like what are the quantifiable risks that we have by having this data in this place that we have it? Then we want to look at some controls, right, to protect it. We want to monitor and audit, right? We're all pretty familiar with that, I think. And of course, incident response and remediation. So those are kind of the 7 core components of it. This works very closely with something called CSPM. I'm not sure if everybody has kind of that, but that's basically your cloud security posture management. So that's kind of that's like the more hands-on portion of it. Like it's like actual reading configurations of your cloud devices, firewall rules, right? All that stuff. While the DSPM side is more the data, like what is data, where is it, all that stuff, right? So I'm going to wrap up by just bringing up a couple of things that this sounds great, right? Like, ooh, we have this thing, and now we're safe. There's a lot of things to think about if you're looking at DSPM, right? You can imagine a situation where you have, there's a problem, but you can't really do anything about it. You can imagine that it's a very complex thing to get right? Some vendors all vendors do this differently, but you have to integrate to pretty much everything, right? You have some agentless type things, but overall you have to see all the stuff to tell you about all this stuff. Data volumes are enormous, right? How do we scale this? How do we manage it? Let's see here, classify it. Like, how do you classify it well, right? You can write rules. Are they the right rules? All that stuff. It's also quite often after the fact, right? You spot it after it's out there, but it's not real time. So what is that delta? Like, what's the gap? How do you enforce that, right? Can you write it as code? Can you react to it, quote unquote, real time? Or do you go later and then what's the point, right? If it's already causing a problem. So, of course, cost, skills, all that stuff. there are no silver bullets. Somebody said recently there's a lot of lead bullets, so there's a lot of work to be done. And yeah, so with that, I would like to introduce my friend Ben. Come on up, please. We're gonna have Ben join us for a few minutes, and he has some hands-on practical experiences with all this. Ben is here we go. Who's Ben? Uh, so I'll let Ben introduce himself in a second. I've known him for quite a while here. I think last time I saw him in a weird place was at DEF CON. Like, was it 1 in the morning? You were doing some kind of scavenger hunt, or it was fun. Good times. Yeah, exactly. So
It was fun.
so what we're gonna do is we're
Happens
gonna
at DEF CON, stays at DEF CON.
That's right. So we're gonna have a little chat, just me and him, and please chime in with questions and all that kind of stuff. So let me set this up
Yes,
real quick.
thanks for having me. So just a little bit about me. I love the fireside chat thing here. I've been working in cyber and IT for the last good 25 years. So definitely old, as it were. And it's been quite a wild ride. Definitely have a lot of tours within life sciences. So I've got some pharma experience, highly regulated areas, working in government subcontractors, so in the government space as well. Happy to answer any questions as it pertains to being able to apply this to your own situation. And just as a quick aside, this is hard. This isn't easy at all. Like if you've got somebody that's trying to say, "Oh, I can like spin this up in like 5 minutes," sure, maybe they can. But when you go to actually apply this and you're going through organizational change management, which is a fancy way to be able to say, getting the company culture to adopt what you're trying to accomplish, it's hard. If you think phishing training is hard, this is especially harder, could be a multi-year, even for like a smaller organization endeavor, just to be able to get it to a point where you can effectively do DLP. And going through here, I'm going to try to share some practical approaches and how to start that. I've been through the journey a couple times and got definitely some mistakes that I've made along the way. Love to be able to share that with everybody here. It's that way you can be able to take those mistakes and be able to make them successes. Definitely challenging.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So let's start off with just go back to when you first like encountered real sprawl, like tons of data. What did that look like, and what was your approach to kind of taming that?
Unstructured data is a nightmare. SMB shares, SharePoint, data in somebody's OneDrive. It's been copied, stuff like that. Let's take a scenario, actually. You've got some type of regulatory body that you're going to be sending data to. It's got to probably go through 5 different hands. You're going to email that. So that's one. One that's on your drive. It's on your personal computer. Then you're going to email it to somebody. They're going to then save it somewhere. They're going to then send it around. It gets saved somewhere else. And it becomes a nightmare because that one document, that one potentially controlled document, has now been copied 20 different times. And if you need to go through and say, what is the source of truth? That document may have changed along that path. And it may have changed in a minor way, it may have changed in a significant way that makes it almost impossible to be able to say, this is now my source of truth. And so from a regulatory perspective, it's an absolute nightmare. So tracking that is really, really difficult. It starts with, if I may, it starts with being able to figure out what your data governance is. And data governance, since we've got a wide broad of folks here, is really the rules around how we're going to play the game. Are we going to allow data to be transferred? Are we allow it to be emailed? Are we going to be training our users? Are they going to have the right rules on like what classification the different data types are? And then enforcing that. It starts with trying to figure out what your strategy is. If you don't have a strategy, start there first. And that starts with conversations. The human aspect is huge whenever trying to take a cultural or a task like being able to do data loss prevention or DPSM or CASB or whatever the acronym is going to be. It starts with conversations. It starts with figuring out what it is that you're trying to accomplish, identifying what your digital crown jewels are, and then moving on from there. Then finding a tool, then finding a way to be able to say, what am I even up against? I now have my tool, I have my strategy, I have what I'm trying to accomplish. What does my city map look like? From there, then you can take that city map, and I'm kind of getting into like how would I explain this from like a 1,000-foot view down. Get that city map, and then you can figure out what you want to do with it. As you're having the conversations, though, continue to be able to try to figure out if this is going to be something that's long term. Somebody needs to own it. If nobody's owning it and nobody's taking action on it, you can have alerts all day long. Think of your SIMs for those who are in a SOC. Think of email alerts or Microsoft 365 user alerts, right? If nobody's actioning the alerts that you're getting, the whole thing is worthless. And this whole program from Gartner and all of the controls and all the awesome work that people have been putting into it, it doesn't do anybody any good if nobody's taking action against it. And so from the data sprawl, going back to that piece, it is really, thank you. It is very, 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 very difficult to be able to do, but it does start with figuring out what your strategy is and then addressing what that data looks like.
So thinking back to that point, I'm assuming this had to go to a board, it had to go to some management, you had to convince them that this is a real thing now. We like it's a different world. Do you remember like was there any conversations there that would be helpful too?
When you're thinking about explaining this to the executive team, they're really not going to be looking at what the acronyms are. And they may not even know what DLP is, so definitely spell it out. My advice to anybody that's going to get in front of an executive board or an executive team or in any way is whenever you're talking about acronyms, spell it out. Say what the acronym is, and then use something that makes sense about that acronym. And so when talking about this, I like to use the traffic cop analogy and the city map analogy, where DSPM is really the city map. It's how I'm able to see what's out there. It's my landscape. It's where everything is. I now have visibility into what would otherwise be behind the whole fog of war. And then DLP comes along as the traffic cop saying, okay, you can't actually send this email. You can't do that. Or you can't store it into this file location, or these people may not be allowed to be able to access those documents.
And then have there been moments that stood out to you kind of during the implementation of this, like something where you were now seeing something you weren't before, like somewhere you would solve a problem, catch something that shouldn't be happening? Like, have you had any concrete results from that
Yeah. So
that you can share publicly?
yeah, the views and everything that we're talking about here is not representative of the companies or anything that we're with, right? That whole disclaimer. When you're getting visibility into this, after you've established what your practice is going to be, what your strategy is going to be, like where the data is, and you figure out where your enforcement is, you get a lot of visibility into how this data is moving. And you get a lot of visibility into where it's been copied to. There's a statistic I saw, it was like about 10 violations to your own policies happen every day in just data movements. So when you go in doing this, and there's the five steps towards a pragmatic approach to taking care of data loss prevention as well as DSPM, is after you figured out your strategy and you figured out what is where the data is and such, and how you're going to lock it down, the human training part is important, and it takes the longest. And one of the ways that you can do that through finding incidents is not necessarily slapping somebody on the hand, but using it as a training moment. If you can grab a tool when you're at this stage that can help train people on the spot, saying, hey, you can't transfer this data, or if you move this data, it's going to be a violation of our policy. We instead want you to go and transfer it here instead. Here's an approved, sanctioned, IT sanctioned, legal sanctioned tool or platform to be able to use for probably whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish with data transfer. That is a much better approach to this than the hand slapping. Earlier on in my career, going into cyber, I was like, I'm going to lock down everything, and people are going to have access to anything. It's going to be so secure, and I was hated. And the idea of people saying no in cyber, it's a historical thing. The cyber practitioners and cyber leaders of today really need to be an enabler and be able to find a way to yes. Being a partner in the process and in enrolling folks in the protection that we're all in this together. Yeah.
Yeah, and we talk about the department of know-how, like try and like you want to do something great, this is the way you should do it, right? Instead
Mhm.
of this other way that's horrible for all of us. So
Yeah.
so AI, I'm assuming you heard of it. Gen AI, maybe in this context in particular, um, any thoughts or experiences on how that changes the game? Like, how are we now dealing with and including shadow AI, right? Like AI that just kind of happens without having the right tools for it. How does that play into this? And is this something that we can realistically catch with these tools?
So what I thought was interesting about some of the slides that we had up here regarding what we can catch and what we can see, once it exits our ecosystem, we may never see it. We may never be able to uh, see what happens to it after it gets out and it gets copied around. AI is a great tool. It is an enabler. And in this case, it is going to enable mass copying and mass distribution of these files. It comes without saying, right? The biggest struggle, though, and the biggest challenge that we're going to have with AI in this space is that it's not so much that the data is being copied. It is going to inherently and intuitively know what access it already has. Let's take the example for Copilot. If you're in an environment where you're going to start enabling Copilot, your Copilot AI is already going to have access to everything that may already be misconfigured and that you may not be supposed to have access to. And that is going to be applied to everybody through the organization. As security practitioners, we think about the threat actor. Threat actor gets in your environment, Copilot is going to be up. It's going to be so much fun to be able to go into Copilot and be like, give me all the data on finance team so I can figure out how to do ACH fraud. Copilot's going to say, great, the user that you have compromised has this whole thing with procurement, and this is how they talk to procurement. This is all the data that they have access, and there may be data that they have access to that user may not even have known that they had access to, but Copilot does, because Copilot already has it. And it's not going to rationalize, well, maybe this board deck that has everybody's salary in it, you probably shouldn't see, even though you have access to it. It's going to give it to the threat actor. It's going to give it to the end user anyway, because they have access to it. I think AI is a great way to be able to um, uh, accelerate a lot of the workflow processes that we have today, but it's also a great way to be able to expose the data storage and data permissions problem that we have today.
Yeah, and you have the data plane and the control plane very intermingled, like when you talk about AI models and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You can put controls in there, but they're going to be probabilistic, not deterministic most of the time, right? So it'll be fine 100 times, but the next time it might not be. And there's ways around it and prompt injection and like, all those things, right? You can.
Oh, totally. And I was just talking about generative AI, the chatbot AI, not to mention any of the agentic AIs where you've got a whole identity problem. We could probably do a whole session on identity as an issue, right? It's not so much the AI, it's the identity or the connectors in between each of them, and how we're going to be managing the security of that. That was just the generative AI side of it.
And you find that AI inherits the permissions of the user.
Yeah, straight away, because that's who it's playing as. It's playing as the user. Almost think of it like your PowerShell script. You're going to be able to do everything that you can do given your permissions. If you're trying to vibe code, or if you're grabbing a script online from some GitHub and you're running it, It's gonna run as you, and it's gonna run with everything that you have access to. If you run as admin, which I highly recommend not running as admin, run as user to save yourself, it's gonna execute. And the generative AIs that are hooked into your tenant or hooked into any type of data repository that you already have access to, it's going to run with the greatest amount of privilege that it can muster.
I think you said vibe coding, and we all have this like the word vibe coding. Um, I think that in not very long time from now, coding will be vibe coding. It'll be the same thing, and we're already sort of there. You have the I forget his name now, but the lead coder for Anthropic who developed Claude Code hasn't written a line of code since November. Like Claude Cowork was written by Claude Code, right? So some of us are like, ah, it'll never happen, but it's gonna happen. Trust me, and it's gonna come probably faster than you think, right? So, and that's a whole other rabbit hole of now you have all these dependencies and the whole TPRM side of it and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Back to the data stuff. Looking at like, so did you go from like DLP kind of traditional into more like DSPM type thinking, and were there any learnings or kind of specific, I don't know, rules or setups or something that you found useful on that journey?
Yeah. So the first time I tried to do this, I tried to just do DLP because I thought DLP was the way to go. Lock it down. The securest computer is in a box of cement at the bottom of the ocean, unplugged. Right. It's the best thing ever. It's not usable, so no user is going to be able to benefit from it. And I thought DLP is going to be the greatest thing. I'm going to just lock it down. I already know what my users should and shouldn't do, and I was so far wrong. I learned from there that it's really not about the controls yet until you figure out what the data actually is. And the classification of that data, it evolves over time based off the risk profile that the business owners or the data owners have for that data itself. Executives are going to want to take their decks and they're going to want to put it in Notepad LM. That right there is a DSPM issue right there, because you're copying it from one location to another. Could be a potentially sensitive document. It's going into an LLM to be able to produce a slide deck or a podcast. They're going to want to do that. People are going to want to use these tools in a way that adds value to them. Help them do that in a safe way. Provide them the guidance to be able to say, well, if you do that, this type of data is classified under this area. And get the executive buy-off on it, and have the executive team help enforce that. They will know whether or not, and they can always make the risk-based call to say, you know what, this is not that big of a risk for us, because if this leaks out over the course of 3 months, it's not actually going to do any damage. And so that can help you with your whole classification policy, not to mention the DLP side of it, not to mention the DSPM. We got a question up in the front.
Oh, thank you. Or similar to that with the executive suite, I've been in situations where they've said, yes, we understand there's a risk, but the benefit is large enough that we'll take it. It's not quite a, it's only temporarily a risk or it's a manageable risk. There's this other benefit that we say we've got to have that or got to do that or whatever it is.
Yeah, there's absolutely an opportunity to leveraging that data ahead of what the policy might be even allowing it. And as the business owner or as the executive that's signing off on it, it's their prerogative to be able to do that. It's our job as security practitioners to be able to inform them on the risk and help them really understand they're fine. They want to speed down the freeway and potentially get a ticket, let them know how much the ticket's going to be, and maybe where some hot spots are where they might get pulled over faster.
Yeah, especially right now, there's a lot of speed, like time to market, because everybody is doing some version of an AI version of what they did before. And it's not a very popular stance to be, no, you can't, right? So we have to figure out how, know how, not know. but there's going to be a risk profile associated with that. Like there's gonna be, and most likely a fairly substantial increase in the risk. That's just kind of how it is. Have you had any metrics that have been like useful to kind of quantify this? Because it's very easy to say, yeah, there's all this stuff out there, but and yeah, you can have, I guess, number of detections or something is one, but like, are there any learnings there that come to mind?
Yeah, so key risk indicators or performance indicators are really important to be able to demonstrate to management, as well as your own efficacy of the application that you're using. A lot of the things that come out of the box for a lot of tooling is to show the performance of the tooling. It doesn't have the context of your business. So when you go through and you're building performance indicators, build them to your business. Figure out what it means to do a alert to resolution in this case. So when you've got your program matured, you've already figured out the strategy, you've already figured out where your assets are, you've gone through the user training, you've applied some kind of tooling in there to be able to capture data and classify it and figure out what your weak points are, and you started doing your hardening, and then you're rinsing and repeating in the whole like CI/CD model, right? Go back through that and then start building out the metrics that matter for your team. And it may be we received an alert and it took us 3 days to be able to action on it. That might be acceptable, that might be unacceptable, depending on the risk profile of the organization. But those are metrics that you can then say, like going into management, like this is where our risks are. We have a delay of like 3 days. Should we have this type of a detection? They might be okay with that and get them to sign off on that and move on. But those are the metrics that I would start to focus on. Things like we detected like 30 different things that are happening every single day. That may not matter. You may not care about that, but you might care about a data store that hasn't been touched in 3 months, a year, that all of a sudden had a data movement of a gig, 3 gigs. Or it just so happens that everything that is tagged as finance is now being moved around that hasn't been touched in a long time. Now, that might be normal behavior, especially around audit season for like SOX audits, or if you're doing something with GLBA. Like it might be normal type of behavior, but those are the kind of alerts and those are the kind of detections that I would start to build in as business context-aware alerts and triggers.
And so going into all of this, were there any like friction in terms of people and processes and rolling this out? Like any learnings on how to like pragmatically approach this?
Yeah. So coming in there with a big hammer, it doesn't work. It really doesn't. You can try. You can even get
Fun.
It's fun, sure. And some executives are like, I want people just, I want it to be locked down. I want it to be locked down like Fort Knox. That it just doesn't work. You've got to go through the program step by step. You've got to go through and enrolling people, building champions within the different groups, having them help you classify the data, having you help you with the normalization of that data, and be able to get them enrolled in the overall process. I can't emphasize it enough. The people aspect is huge. If you're not enrolling the folks and you just go and come as a pure play tech play, it's not going to work.
And so this may be the answer to the next one, but is the one lesson that you say, okay, if you're going to go down this route, absolutely do this. Is that the people angle? Is that most important, or something else?
It needs to be fit for purpose. When you're exploring this, and it needs to be right-sized. When you're communicating this to whomever, whether you're going into management, you're going into the rest of the tech team, whomever, play at the level of what the business need is. The business wants to be successful. The business wants to be profitable or reach its goals and such. If we're in the business of saying no, then we are getting in the way. And shadow AI, shadow IT, shadow everything is going to come up because it's going to be like figuring out a way around it. The best thing to do is start some conversations. Figure out where that data is. and having folks that are really excited about their program, their product, their data that they have out there are some of the best champions. Having these conversations is also a great way to be able to identify some additional risks that may not just be data. It could be that this person's like, I've been storing this on this Linux server for the last 3 years. I know it's a big data risk. I know it's a compliance risk. I know that this then doesn't get backed up, so we're at risk of this one machine. It's never been patched. You start having these conversations, you get so much additional data from folks that can absolutely accelerate your data maturity program out of the gate. So I think my biggest piece of advice: start with conversations.
All right. I think we'll open up to some questions, perhaps, if there's any out there. And
cool. Thank you, guys.
Bunch of questions. All right.
This is my day-to-day job right now.
Don't envy you, honestly.
I know. And I'm hearing it and I'm like, okay, where do I catch the thread which I can unravel then? Two things that I was thinking about. One is DLP program. The other, we're talking about AI assistant like Microsoft Copilot. Microsoft just released an incident report where Copilot was able to read sensitive emails, although it was locked down by DLP. I don't know if you saw that. So when I'm thinking about day-to-day, I'm thinking, gosh, I'm just trying to set up a DLP. I don't have a Copilot yet. Once I introduce Copilot, how do you really think about the data from the perspective of not only you are setting up DLP policies and rules, but our data is not that locked down yet. Like you can make a copy of it. No, we don't have anything like that right now. We're just looking at email, for example. Please do not send this data outside of the environment without encryption. That's all we're looking at. Maybe social security number, employee identification number, or something like that. So how do you wrap your head around? I like the idea of conversations. I think that's what I'm trying to do. Talking to people and they're understanding what data they're dealing with day to day as well.
Okay, so the question is around how do we deal with AI in a not as mature environment and be able to still protect folks from themselves doing stuff that they are allowed to do. Is that pretty?
Yeah, that's a good start. Yeah.
Okay. I think AI is great. I absolutely do.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So generative AI, so we're talking about that one.
Yes, we are.
With Copilot. It's a chat. One of the ways that I think that is really easy to understand from a practitioner perspective for everybody that's in the room is the traffic light protocol. If a lot of folks might be already familiar with the traffic light protocol, it is a way to be able to say, is this clear to be able to send to everybody out under the sun? Is this restricted? Should it just be within a department? Is it like TLP orange in a way that really it's a select amount of group, or is TLP red? For anybody that's in the government subcontracting or has served, may have already seen this on documentation that's out there today. This is a way to be able to help users understand what kind of conversations you should be having with folks. These different generative AI tools are like different companies that may not be under NDA. They may not be trusted. You might not want to share that information with them. Getting a data classification that's real simple to understand with real easy guardrails with where they can start sharing information, having these conversations with an AI bot is a great first step. And it'll open up a lot more information around what can be shared out there. Then when you're talking to folks about, well, if I throw it into Copilot and it gives me an output and I want it to send a message, it's human in the middle, it's human in the beginning, it's human at the end. In your AI policy, it really should state, it is the end user's work product at the end of the day. If they send something out, it's them. It's your name that's on it. You wrote it, you sent it. It's your work product. You're putting your reputation on the line for the work product that's going out there. You can't hide behind, oh, well, Gemini said this, or Claude had this error in it, or ChatGPT had this error rate. And it's fine because it's an 80% error rate. It doesn't really know. It doesn't matter. You sent it. And having that into your policy with clear expectations on what the guiding posts are for data classification is important. Then training the end users. And that'll ultimately be a stopgap in between getting DLP really dialed in and helping the end users ultimately help you, but help themselves from getting themselves in trouble.
No, say you're running into, unstructured versus structured data, right? And you're suddenly generating a lot of data very fast. And so you need to have the processes or tools in place to categorize that data. Like, is it a red or green or whatever your protocol might be? And you have to have a situation where like Ben says, Gemini made this or Claude made this. The problem is, like, we all love the human in the middle or in the loop or whatever. As the speed picks up, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to do that, right? So that's going to be it's going to be a problem, and we're going to need tools to do that at scale. When you have an agent on quote unquote your behalf, but talking to 50 other agents and doing stuff at machine speed, now we need something else. And is it still you, or is it, an agent identity at that point? So it's going to be very interesting. There's a lot of changes that are going to happen.
Let's go green and then blue.
So Ben, thank you for sharing your methodology. It relaxed me for a while because it's very easy to follow, especially the things about conversation, a lot of conversation. However, when I start to follow your steps in my mind, my question to you is, how do you, at the speed, because you have to do very fast. You don't have time to think, oh, I will interview the next person, because the top executives already they want to have the solution right now. Also, the threats, the vulnerabilities are right now. So how do you address your great process, but at a great speed?
So how to address the process at the speed of business, at the speed of the curiosity of the users? It's really hard. And so just like when you're talking about what risks you're going to address, what's the biggest bang for the buck? Usually it starts with policy. Excuse me. Be able to address. It's not going to address everything. There's no silver bullet. You can't boil the ocean. You can't do all of the phrases and out there, right? Yeah, but it has to start. Either it goes into the risk registry, it goes into conversations within some of your executive decks to be able to make sure that it's well informed. But starting with whatever the biggest bang for the buck is. Yeah.
And don't let, what's the saying? Well, I was gonna say the enemy of good is perfect, whatever. It's not gonna be perfect. Start somewhere and then iterate on that.
Yeah, for sure.
The phrase is, the perfect is the enemy of the good. Well, I was just gonna briefly add to what you said before, Ben, around human responsibility for this. Gemini, Claude, and ChatGPT are not legal people, and so they cannot be responsible for crimes. I suppose you could maybe try to sue the manufacturer. That would be unprecedented, long, probably would fail. Gemini's not a legal person. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
and it can't make the decisions for you. And there's legal precedence on that that's going through the courts today of like, are you going to let it have autonomy to be able to make decisions? Right. And the human all over the place, that's absolutely where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, and to that end, the law, I'm probably stating the obvious here, the law needs to catch up with this technology, because if you let Gemini, I don't mean to pick on Google, but if you let Gemini make a decision, it's not a legal person. Can't be responsible. So then who's the fault? Maybe. It's legally unprecedented.
Oh, red. I just noticed that we had red in the back.
Hi. So I really liked what you said about talking to the different business stakeholders and understanding what type of data they process or store, and the different like subtypes of data. I think where I often get tripped up or struggle when it comes to data management is the data discovery part. Like there's just so many realms where data can be held, the network, email, cloud, desktop. So I'm wondering if you've ever come across that challenge and if you have any suggestions, either from a pragmatic standpoint or a tooling standpoint.
That's a brilliant question. There was a slide that you had up earlier on the, it's like a network diagram of like all the different places that data could be at any given time. It's like your SSO. You're not going to have this one here. You're not going to be able to capture everything. There's going to have to be a good enough. And if that starts with 10 applications or 10 data stores, that's a great start. And it may never come to a place where you're 100% coverage. It's a CISO nightmare, right? It's like it's an opportunity. It's a challenge. It's really hard because, like inventory, you may never have a full inventory. You may have 6 nines to your inventory. You may have 6 nines coverage on your data. At some point, you're going to have to call it and say that it's good enough. Well, good enough for now. Yeah, for sure. Green.
So to me, data classification and data handling requirements are the foundation of DSPM and risk-based approach to information security. But actually implementing that, managing that, you can start with a policy, to your point, Ben, which is relatively easy, but to actually put that into practice and make sure everyone classifies their data and reclassifies and handles it correctly, that's the real challenge that I've found in my experience. How have you addressed that in your experience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I also echo that it is a hard challenge to be able to crack. It's iterative. You can use all kinds of tooling to be able to get like our sponsor here today. You can use easy plugs. I know, right? To be able to gather like what that is, and that's your whole mapping of the city, as it were, being able to figure out what that is. Tooling helps you with some of the classification, but you got to tell the tooling what it is. You got to be able to inform it, and it really comes back to that whole strategy piece. So data governance isn't just an IT problem; it's a business problem, and you need to take it from a business perspective. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But does the business know they are accountable?
Oh, they will when you tell them they're.
When you tell them?
Yeah.
How do you tell that to business?
Whether or not they are accountable for something.
Yeah.
When you bring it up to them and it's like, hey, this is a risk. It's a risk that you need to be aware of, and here's what could happen if this risk materializes.
If you can put a monetary number on it, it helps a lot. Like your exposure is $3 million. It's not, 8 files. Like that makes the conversation start a little faster.
It does. And for the practitioners that are out there, if you want to have a really easy way to be able to do this, I'd recommend the FAIR model. I think the FAIR model does a really good job of being able to articulate a meaningful dollar amount against a particular risk.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that were asking questions, I think you guys touched about it in the beginning of the slide. asset management. Seemed like that'd be very important to know all your identities, all your assets, and then the associated data with those assets. If you don't know what you have, how can you protect it? So
Same thing goes for data.
yeah, so I mean, the data is attached to an asset, right? It's generating the data, whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, on the endpoint. So I'm just wondering what kind of tooling you see people use to capture where their data is and then associate with the asset.
Well, without taking away from our wonderful sponsor over here, there's quite a bit of tooling out there, but I would caution before you get to the tooling, figure out what it is that you want to accomplish, and then start to apply some tooling, which might not be what we want to hear from the sponsor perspective, but figure it out first, and then go out for the tooling.
Yeah, no, because I think Ben's point is valid. I've talked to a lot of people that they say, we don't know what we have. Where do we start? And if we don't have an idea of what the structure is going to look like, you could talk to any tool on the market. You could talk to Telescope or any other DSPM, and they'll sell you a sack full of beans. But ultimately, if you don't know what to do with it, how are you going to cook a meal? So you have to understand what you're trying to accomplish before you can bring a tool into it. So typically what that means is taking a broad look at the business. What values to the data are we looking for? What assets do we need to discover? And then how do we build a policy around it? We don't need to have the policy in place, but we need to know what kind of policy we're looking to accomplish before we take a stab at tools. It's very valid.
Yeah, and you can start it off as simply as figuring out like your digital crown jewels, like what is most important. You can talk to any of the executive team or any of the business owners and say, if there was something that got leaked today that could destroy the business, what would that be? And start the conversation there. They know what is the most valuable thing that they have access to, that they don't want anybody to be able to see.
All right. I want to thank Ben for coming out. Appreciate it. Give him a round.